I never let my dream die. I never let my purpose die. There were so many times I could have said, you know what? I'm comfortable here. I'm making good money. The work's okay. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to settle. I would advise your audience not to settle. Find out what it is in your life that you feel you're supposed to do. There's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you. Go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
It's such an honor to have you here. Could you start by telling our audience a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, Julian, thanks for having me on. I'm very happy to be here today and have this opportunity to talk with you. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, one of the larger cities in the United States. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me, excuse me, or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. So I moved home to find a job. And my first job was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Professionally, as I said, started out at Wendy's. Then I moved to hospital administration. I actually went to work for the hospital that took care of my father and my grandmother. After that, I made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT Team Hostage Negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball, became an author in 2020. But for the last 11.5 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 30 years. We have one child, a daughter who's in the military here in the United States.
Wow, those are really a lot of achievements. I mean, it's very interesting. So most of my audience, they're in their first career or second career, and many of them are not really happy where they're at and thinking about switching to another career, but have doubts, right? So could you perhaps share with us a bit about what happened at each junction when you changed careers? What was going through your mind, and what was sort of your decision process back then?
So I need to give you a little bit of a backstory, because if you look at my resume, it kind of looks like a super ball went off in a room and it just bounces all over the place. But there is a backstory. And if you understand the backstory, the resume makes a little bit more sense. So my grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories that my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us, your husband's been shot. And let's face it, trauma medicine in 1933 is a whole lot different than trauma medicine in 2023. So when I expressed an interest in sort of following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's what my dad wanted me to do. That's not the life that I felt I was supposed to do. So I had a really big life choice when I graduated from college. I could have said, sorry, Dad, I'm going to go blaze my own trail and do my own thing. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So understanding that, my first 2 jobs were in business because it's what my father wanted me to do. It's not what I felt my passion was or my purpose was. And then I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited until my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. And I know there's people, I've had so many people have reached out to me that said a family member was influencing them in what they wanted to do in their career. And so how do you deal with that? That's a hard thing to deal with. I mean, people do that. My father wanted me to be in business, not because of spite, but because he loved me. because he wanted something he felt was better for me. But one of the biggest things I'm proudest of in my life, and I don't mean to sound conceited with this, is that I never let my dream die. I never let my purpose die. There were so many times I could have said, you know what? I'm comfortable here. I'm making good money. The work's okay. I'm just going to stay here. I'm going to settle. I would advise your audience not to settle. Find out what it is in your life that you feel you're supposed to do. And I always tell this, especially to young people, and I'll end it with this. Whenever I talk to young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think many of the people watching this can relate to this. They have certain dreams, but they don't follow them because other people, could be friends, relatives, parents especially, who are not really supportive of that. And they just let their dream die. And I remember you saying in your book that I spent too much of my life attempting to live my father's life instead of the life I was born to live. And I I can't imagine how that was like in that moment. How did you overcome that? I mean, that must be a challenge, right? Because you want to make your parents happy. You want to follow their advice. So how did you get around that and still went on and followed your dream anyway?
Yeah, that's a great question. My parents were great. I mean, I had a great childhood. I've got two brothers. We all played athletics. We all went to college to play sports. I mean, we had a great family. So it wasn't like my parents were trying to do anything to hurt me or undermine me. They just wanted, I think, what every parent was. You want something better for your child than you had. But the thing you've got to understand is that you can't live someone else's life. No matter how much you try, no matter how much you want the approval of whoever raised you, whether it's your parents, your grandparents, an aunt and uncle, whoever that is. And we try to do that. We try to, I want my dad to be proud of me. I did. My dad was my hero. But at the same time, I also hope, and my dad died before I got into law enforcement. I hope that wherever my dad is, he understands that I had to do what was important to me, what was the work that I was put on this earth to do, and not do something because I made a lot of money or because I had a lot of power or had a lot of prestige. Things don't make you happy. And I'll give you this story to kind of end this. I think so many people feel that they're born empty and that their job when they get out of school and sort of get into life is to fill themselves up. They've got to get a great education. They've got to drive the nicest car. They've got to have the greatest job, make the most money, have the latest iPhone, live in the best apartment or house. And that somehow having these things will fill themselves up and will make themselves happy and fulfilled. And what I've come to understand is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full with everything we need to be successful already inside of us. We just need to find that, pull it out, and use it to our benefit. So our life should not be about what we get. It should be about what we give. And by emptying ourselves out for the betterment, certainly of ourselves, but also of our family, of our friends, and our community, I believe leads to a much happier and much more fulfilled life. Somehow people, if I get a lot of money, if I get stuff, I'm going to be happy. There's always one more thing to get that you think will make you happy. And I've had the opportunity, and I've listened to several of your recordings. I think you have too, where you've seen people that have what we would all say, that person is incredibly successful, but they're not happy. They're not fulfilled. They're chasing something that they'll never catch. It's not what you get. It's what you give. It's what you give in service to other people that makes you happy.
That's so true. Yeah. And talking about leading a fulfilling life, having a fulfilling career, I'm thinking about your book, Sustainable Excellence, right? Where the tagline is 10 principles to leading your uncommon and extraordinary life. So I would love to know a bit more about that. What do you actually mean specifically by uncommon and extraordinary? I mean, it sounds very enticing, it sounds something that we want to strive towards, but what does it actually mean to have a life that is uncommon? And we only have this one life, right? What makes it uncommon and extraordinary?
You're right. We do have this one life. And in the scheme of things, this life is incredibly short. We're not here for very long. And so I think what makes a life uncommon and extraordinary is living your purpose. What were you put on this earth to do? Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, for your audience that doesn't know, was a concentration camp survivor during World War II, ended up becoming a psychiatrist and wrote some amazing books about his experience in those concentration camps. And he talks about that every one of us has a moral responsibility to find our purpose in life and live it. And so many people never even search for it. So I would tell you to search for your purpose. And we tend to take that word purpose in the singular, like it's one thing that we're supposed to do. In my life, I've had what I believe to be purposes. When I was young, I was an athlete, and I went to college, as I mentioned, on a basketball scholarship. And then when I became an adult, I felt my purpose changed to being a police officer and doing what I did when I was in law enforcement. And now, as I'm battling cancer and more than likely coming towards the end of my life, I think my purpose has changed again to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world as I possibly can. And I think we sort of get caught up in this, I wish my job was my purpose. And if you can find that, that's great. But understand, it doesn't have to be that way. Your job could be something over here that you do, excuse me, to pay the bills, but your purpose is over here. And maybe it's to be a podcast host. Maybe it's to paint. Maybe it's to write. Maybe it's to be an activist. Whatever it is that's in your heart that you believe you're supposed to do. I think if you do things, and the other thing I'll say about this, there's no such thing as a perfect job. I don't care how much money you make, I don't care. There's no such thing as a perfect job. There'll always be things that you don't like about the job that you have. So don't chase a job for money, first of all. Don't ever take a job for money. If that's the only reason you're taking it, you're going to be unhappy eventually. And also don't chase a job because you think it's going to give you stuff. What can you contribute to that job? How can my values, how can my ideas make this company, make these people better off? Whether it's your customers, whether it's the people you're responsible for as a manager, or whether it's just your colleagues that you work with. Look at it more about what you can give more than what you can get out of the job.
Yeah, very well said. I'm also a strong believer, as you, Terry, that finding your purpose and leading a purposeful life, not just career, but life in general, is very important. But I guess what many people ask themselves is, how do I get to that purpose? How do I find that purpose? And many people tend to try and find purpose in external things by maybe just copying what other people are doing, because they think, okay, this person is, let's just say, a YouTuber or so, right? And it looks like something interesting. Okay, I'll tag onto that. I'll make that my purpose. But how do you actually find your purpose? Because I feel that every person has something unique, right, to bring to this world. We're not just a copy of someone else. We have unique skills, talents, and backgrounds. And so, like in your experience, you found your path and became a police officer and eventually a SWAT negotiator. So that is probably also one of your purposes in life. So could you tell us a bit about how you found your purpose, and what advice would you give to people if they're lost in this and they're trying to find their purpose?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, don't feel like because you're lost that it's hopeless. It's not hopeless. Everybody's like that. I mean, when I was 18 years old, I majored in business because my dad told me to. I had no idea where I was going with my life. I had no idea. So don't feel that if you're unsure of where things are going, that somehow something's wrong with you. No, you're just like the rest of us. We all have to figure it out. The other thing I would tell you is follow your heart. we always say, approach it with an open mind. I'd say approach it with an open heart. What is it that you feel that you're good at? We used to always tell our daughter, play to your strengths. What are you good at? And she's great at reading and writing and things like that. Math, not so much. So same with me. I mean, if you told me, Terry, go be an accountant, I would say that's not my purpose. That's not something I feel I would be good at. But if you said, hey, be a podcast guest, be a negotiator, do something like that. I remember I can't remember the name of the book, but it was written by a man by the name of Jason Pfeiffer. And he is now the editor-in-chief, I believe, of Entrepreneur Magazine. And he talks about when he graduated from college. He said, I became a small-time newspaper reporter. And he said, I really wasn't fulfilled. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And I decided through watching the editors of the newspaper that I wanted to be an editor. He said, so I went to work for a company that taught me how to do type A editing. And he said, as soon as I learned type A editing, I went to work for another company and I learned type B editing. And as soon as I learned type B, I went to another company and learned type C editing because I knew I wanted to be an editor. So I wanted to learn different things. So I wanted to learn different skills. So I would just tell you, figure out what your gifts are, what your talents are, find something that looks interesting and jump into it. It may be what you're supposed to do. It may be not what you're supposed to do, but you can learn even from the negative. You can learn from the people around you about being a leader, about things that, oh, okay, I like this, but I don't like that. Whatever that ends up being in your life. I mean, my first job I mentioned was at Wendy's. I mean, when I started, I got a college degree. I'm ready to make my mark in the world. I basically made copies, got lunch for meetings, and gassed up the company cars of the marketing managers that I was working with. That was, I got a college degree. This is what I'm doing. But you got to pay your dues. You're not going to start in the corner office. Learn the work. That's the other thing I would say. You got to love the grind. You got to love the work. If you love the work, you'll do anything. You'll enjoy anything. Again, nothing's going to be perfect, but enjoy the grind. Find something you enjoy, the work. If you do that, you're probably on the road to finding your purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about skills and taking a look at the gifts that you have, right? So if you're okay, I want to talk a bit more about your career as a police officer. So before you got into that, did you already know that, okay, this is something that I'm meant to do? Like I would be good at this? Or did you ever have doubts and like, will I be a good police officer or not? Can I do this? Or were there never any doubts from the start?
Oh, no, there was always doubts. And I think anybody that tells you they never doubt themselves, I don't care how, if the president of the company or the CEO, well, whoever it is, tells you that they have no doubts, they're lying to you. It's kind of like people used to ask us, do you ever get afraid as a police officer? And I used to always say, well, somebody who tells you as a police officer that they're never afraid is either lying to you or they're an idiot. Because sometimes we have fear for a reason. It keeps us alive. So yes, I always had doubts. Can I do this? I remember when I started out as a reserve police officer in the city of Santa Barbara in California, one of the first runs I ever went on was an auto accident. And the person was like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. My house is right there. Can I please go to the bathroom? And I let him go. And my training officer was like, what are you doing? Why did you let him go? And I'm like,
sorry, what is a reserve officer exactly? I don't know the difference.
It's a sworn officer that is not full-time. I worked like on weekends and things like that. And I worked under the direction of a full-time sworn officer. I eventually, when we moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, I became a sworn officer, a full-time officer. But yeah, I made mistakes, but learned from those mistakes. I recall the quote from Nelson Mandela, the former president of South Africa, who said, I never lose. I either learn or I win. So understand that mistakes are part of being successful. Make a lot of mistakes, especially when you're young. Fail often. That's a chapter I put in my book about failing often, especially when you're young. Don't play it close to the vest. Don't play it safe. Get out there, do things, make mistakes, say, hey, this is for me, or no, this isn't for me, and then move on. When you're young, you can do that. As you get older and have more responsibilities, that's a little bit more difficult to do.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite chapters, favorite points in your book about fail often, especially when you're young, right? With the emphasis, especially when you're young, because I realized that many of my viewers, they ask themselves what they want to do, but they don't always have the courage to try things out. And I think if you don't try anything and never fail, then you won't really know what it is that you want to do, right?
I mean, if the bat stays on your shoulder, you'll never hit a home run. You've got to try things. You've got to fail. You've got to understand it's okay to fail as long as you learn from that failure and don't keep making the same mistake over and over and over and over again. And the last thing I'll say about this is that 100%, I'm totally convinced of this, that however you end up or wherever you end up in your life is going to be incumbent upon the 5 people that you hang around with. If you hang around with people that are smart, that are intelligent, that are financially secure, that are learning and growing, you will be like those people. Versus if you hang around with people that it's all negative, it's all drama, it's all about them, then your life will be negative. Your life will be all about somebody else, and your life will be all about drama. So be very careful who you hang around with. Be very careful who you give your time to. Find people that make you a better human being. Find people that love you enough to tell you the truth. I want people around me that'll say, hey, Terry, I think you're messing up here. I don't think you should do that. But what do we do when people do that? We're like, oh, no, you're not my friend anymore. No, those are your true friends because they love you enough to be willing to tell you the truth, even if it sacrifices the relationship that they have with you.
Yeah, that's true. But how would you say do you let go of bad influences? So people who are toxic or a negative influence in your life, but you're just so used to their company and you've been friends for, let's say, a decade, but you have a hard time letting go because you're so attached to them, but it's not good for you. What would you say in that case?
Yeah, I mean, you can even take that a step further and say, relatives. I hang around with my cousin.
Right.
My cousin's a relative, but he's toxic. He's not any good. He's going nowhere in his life. I would just say, do the best you can to try to limit the amount of time you spend with those people and find other people that you can spend more time with. So you can realistically say, oh, hey, cousin Johnny, sorry, I can't do that tonight. I've got another commitment with these individuals that I'm going to. So you actually have something that you're doing. That's a hard thing to do. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with our parents or our grandparents wanting us to move in a particular direction. It's the same thing. If you've got 5 people that are your relatives, boy, it's awful hard to kind of say, I don't want to have anything to do with Uncle Joe anymore or anything like that. No, you need to spend time with Uncle Joe, but try to limit that time if Uncle Joe isn't someone who's giving you what you need to be the best version of yourself.
Right. I totally agree. You can still love them, but it doesn't mean that you have to be around them all the time, right?
Right.
Yeah. Just going back to your career as police officer again, I'm really curious to know about the part where you switched or you changed over to going into the SWAT division, right? Becoming a SWAT hostage negotiator. So how did that come about? How did you know that that was what you wanted to do? Because right now there are many people who, let's say they're working for I don't know, in banking, for example. They're quite happy in banking, but they just feel they're not really in the right spot, let's say not in the right department or function. So could you share, how did you figure out that, okay, what I want to do is actually become a SWAT negotiator specifically? How did that come about?
So I've always in my life wanted to be associated with the best, whatever that looked like. I want to be the best basketball player. Even at Wendy's, I wanted to be good in the marketing department. How can I get better? And it wasn't a good fit for me. I knew that it was not a good fit for me. I felt better in hospital administration, but the SWAT team in most police departments, those are usually the best officers with the best training and the best equipment. So I wanted to be part of the best. And so when there was an opening, and for your listeners that don't understand how most SWAT teams are configured, there's usually—
I don't understand either. Please, okay. Yeah.
So there's really 2 groups. There's a tactical group, tactical teams. Those are the men and women with what we used to call all the toys, the different guns, the armored cars, the shotguns, the gas, all that kind of stuff. And then there are the negotiators. And we used to joke with our counterparts, the tactical team, that if we did our job correctly, they didn't get to use any of their toys. So right. there was kind of a little bit of a friction. Not really. We worked very well together. So when there was an opening as a negotiator, I put in for it. And there was a physical fitness component. You had to run so far, do so many push-ups and sit-ups. You had to meet with the psychologist. You had to take psychological exams. You had to meet with the command staff. And then finally you met with the team. And it was an all or nothing. If one person on the team said, hey, I've worked with Terry before, I think he's lazy, or I don't like him, or I don't like the way he operates, you didn't get on. Everybody had to give you a thumbs up. And I was fortunate enough to get that thumbs up. And that's how I started my career as a negotiator.
Wow. What would sort of a typical day as a hostage negotiator look like? Really curious.
There really wasn't a typical day. We were not a full-time SWAT team. We carried pagers. And I was, believe it or not, I was an undercover drug investigator.
Wow.
I did drugs and I did search warrants and all that.
Exciting.
Yeah, something else I did when I was a cop. So we carried pagers. Again, I'm going to date myself. Everybody's got cell phones now, but we carried pagers. And when the pager went off, you had to go. And I'll tell you, my wife has always been incredibly supportive of my careers, especially in law enforcement. But without a doubt, Sunday night, my wife had made a great dinner for my daughter and I, and the three of us are sitting around the table, having family time, and the pager would go off.
Oh,
and she would look at me like,
oh no,
serious. And I felt so horrible because she had made this beautiful meal. But we talked about it before I got on the SWAT team, before I even put in for it. It's like, will you support me in this? And she knew, I said, I'm sorry, I've got to go. And I would have to get up and leave and go to the call out, wherever it was. And that, so it was, we had a great team. We worked well together. And about 90% of the time, we had a very high success rate. We got the person out. We never lost a hostage. But there were several times, for example, if I was negotiating with somebody who had just murdered 3 people and he knew that he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life, sometimes those people decided to take their own life. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to end it right here. I'm going to end my own life. And while that was always tragic, I don't mean to sound conceited or cold-hearted, I never lost any sleep over that. And I didn't for 3 reasons. 1, I know I had great training. 2, I worked with great people. And 3, I knew I did everything I possibly could to try to get that person out safely. But at the end of the day, they were going to decide how this was going to end.
Wow. I can't imagine how it must be like. Is it really like how it's depicted in the movies, the negotiation scene? Is there any reality to that?
Some. Back in the 1990s, there was a movie called The Negotiator. Samuel L. Jackson played this like Superman guy. And I always get that. Is it like, is it like right. Samuel? No, it's totally not. So yes, there is a primary negotiator, somebody who's doing the talking, but then sitting right next to you is a secondary negotiator who isn't talking, but is listening to everything that's going on. And then there are maybe 3, 4, 5 other members of the team that are kind of out working the crowd. Like, why are we here? There were a lot of times we would show up on scene. We would have no idea why we were there. What happened? Why did this person barricade themselves or take hostages? We had no idea. So they're trying to get information. So as a primary, you may get a note from your secondary that says, don't talk about his mother. Because what the team out in the fields found is that he and his mother had a big fight and he grabbed a gun and he barricaded himself. It's like, okay, so now we know something. So now we don't talk about his mother. And so there was a lot of, there were a lot of things we would do something and then we would say, hey, look, I'll call you back. And then we would kind of put our heads together and say, where should we go from here? How should we proceed? What do you think? And we would all kind of talk it out and then come up with a course of action and then get back on the phone with the person and go down the road with that.
How long were you a hostage negotiator?
4 years.
For 4 years. And you enjoyed it a lot, I guess, by your...
I did. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into it, and I'll give you a couple of them. I remember when I first started, this has to do with how we communicate, and not just as negotiators, but with each other. You know, whether you're in a business point of view or you're with your spouse or your kids, how we communicate, there's a formula, and the formula was 7-38-55. So 7% of how we communicate with each other are the words that we use. And think about that. Think about how much we agonize over saying the right thing. That's only 7% of how we communicate with each other. 38% of it is the tone of voice that we use with those words. And then 55% of how we communicate with each other are our body language and our facial expressions. So as a police officer, 99% of what I did out on the street dealing with citizens was face-to-face, whether I was pulling you over to give you a ticket because you ran a stop sign, or whether I was answering a radio run for a fight at a bar, it was face-to-face. And if I'm talking to you and I'm watching you kind of look around, I'm like, oh, maybe that person wants to escape or to run. Or if you're standing there and you're balling up your fists, oh, maybe you want to fight me. I can see that. I can see those visual clues, and I can do what's appropriate. I can sit you down, I can handcuff you, I can put you in my car, whatever's appropriate for why I'm there. But as negotiators, we didn't have that 55%. So I may say something to you, and I don't see you kind of roll your eyes like, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that. I don't have that luxury. Like I said, sometimes we were going at this blind. It's like, well, let's pick something, let's pick a rabbit hole and go down it. So that was one part of it. The other part is we never asked, or we rarely asked, why questions. So Chu Yen, it would be like me saying, oh, okay, Chu Yen, why did you do that? Oh, wait a minute. That sounds accusatory. It does. It sounds accusatory. It sounds like I'm accusing you of something. I can get at the same thing by using a softer tactic. Chu Yen, what got us to this point? So how and what questions engaged you to help me get you out? You may say something and I might say, well, Chu Yen, how am I going to do that? Well, all I did was lob that ball back into your court, and now you're thinking, well, how's he supposed to do that? Now I've engaged you to help me get you out safely.
Oh, that's so interesting. So this wasn't on my plan at all, Terry, to ask about negotiation, but since we have a negotiation expert here, I really have to ask this question because I know my audience wants to hear this. In a real life practical situation at work, where people want to negotiate their salary or maybe a promotion, do you think any of your negotiation experience, how would you bring that into such a situation at work? Any tips maybe?
Sure, it absolutely works. I think the first thing you've got to do is, and what was the overarching theme of everything we did was trust. We're trying to build trust with an individual that we have never met, and in many cases, we have no idea what precipitated the point where this person's probably having the worst day of their life, where their house is surrounded by the police and they're talking to me. So trust has got to be the overarching thing. Whoever you're negotiating with, whether it's your potential boss or it's human resources or something like that, there's got to be a trusting relationship. So that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I'll say is, and we kind of had this phrase as negotiators, no deal is better than a bad deal. Don't take something because you just feel I need it. The third thing I'd say is do your homework, do your research, know what you're worth, know based on your experience, your education, the talents that you have, that you're worth X amount of dollars for the job that's being offered to you. And you can find that. You can go on LinkedIn, you can go on, I think it's called Glassdoor. I think it's called Glassdoor. You can go on these sites and look up for your area of the country. Now, you're probably going to get paid more in Boston, Massachusetts than you are in Omaha, Nebraska. So understand where you are, how much experience you have, what your background is, and figure out how much you're worth. and understand that. And if you want, if they're not willing to pay for it, I would tell you to walk away. Now that's easy for me to say. I don't know your situation, but I think that would be absolutely part of it. The other thing that I would suggest, and we used to call this tactical empathy. Help me understand where you're coming from. Not necessarily agree. Like I said, if I'm dealing with a guy who's just murdered 3 people, I'm not going to agree that what he did was right, but I want to understand where you're coming from. So get the other person to tell you as much information as they can. What are they looking for this person to do? What are your resources going to be? Who are you going to be working with? What are the expectations? The more information you can get from the person, the better off you're going to be. And then the last thing I'll say is there was a tactic we had called, we called it mirroring. I think it's called parroting now, where we would let you talk, tell me these things, and then whatever the last 2 or 3 words you said, or whatever the most important thing you would say, we would say that back to you. So it would be like, oh, so you don't like your mother. And we would say it in a curious voice, and then we would go silent because we don't like silence. So if you're quiet, then the other person feels uncomfortable and they'll talk more. The more they talk, the more information you get. And you can do that. I mean, I've done that with podcast hosts where I would just say it back to them just to see if I could still do it, and things like that. And they have no idea. And then I'd be quiet. And then they start talking again. So it works. It works not just as a hostage negotiator. It absolutely works. And the other thing I would say is be self-deprecating. If you don't like it, if you don't like the offers, I appreciate what you're doing, but I'm not going to be able to take that offer. And then they may counteroffer. I'm sorry, I just can't take that offer. And then they may counteroffer again. No, I can't take that offer. So there's kind of levels that you can kind of go through to get to the same thing, where you get to the point where, no, I'm not taking that. So there's a great book out by a man by the name of Chris Voss. Chris Voss was the FBI's hostage negotiator. He was the guy.
I heard it. I saw some clips. I think, yeah.
Never Split the Difference. Great book. I would recommend that to your audience. It'll teach you how to negotiate. It'll teach you some of the things that I'm talking about now, but it goes much more in depth than I'm able to do at this point.
Yeah, that sounds great. Very, very useful advice, Terry. Yeah. May I know at what age you started your career as police officer exactly?
I was old. I was 37 years old.
37 years young.
Well, 37 is pretty old to be getting into that line of work, to start as a rookie. A lot of people start right out of high school or right out of college and get into that and have a 20-year career, and they get out when they're in their 40s. And so they can have another career and stuff like that. I started, and that had to go. Pardon me?
Is it because of the physical endurance needed to do the job?
You're wearing, 30 pounds of equipment. You're, running after people. You're working at night. You're working in the rain and the snow. And you're always out there. You're always doing it. There always has to be somebody there to do the job. So you don't sleep. I worked nights most of my police career. We did not have night court. So I'd get off at 7:00 in the morning. I would go get a bagel and I'd go to court. And sometimes I could be at court until, 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And now I've got to go pick up my daughter from school and bring her home. And I still haven't slept. And then I've got to go to work that night. So there were not many times, but enough times where you would go to work, on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and you carried a gun and you had to make sometimes life and death decisions.
Yeah. I guess it's easier to start when you're younger then, right? So personally, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, you're absolutely right. There were people that were my age that were, lieutenants and captains, that had been 15, 18 years on the job and stuff like that. And here I am, this rookie, just starting out. But I love the work and I love the people that I worked with. So that's
most important. Personally, I don't think that 37 is old, but I totally get what you mean, especially in that industry, in that area, right? Now, I think that it takes a lot of courage, like at that age in this context, to still start that new career in that field, in this challenging field, right? So what I wanted to ask you is, a lot of people in my audience, they're even just in their 20s, maybe 24, 25, and want to change careers. But even at that age, they think that it's too late. It's too late because, the normal excuses. I've went to college, like I've studied this and this for 3 4 years, business administration and so on. I worked in marketing now. If I change now, everything will go to waste. So it's kind of too late for me, even though they're still 24. So what would you say about that?
Baloney. It's not too late. It's not too late. It's if you don't get up in the morning and want to go to work, I would tell you you're probably not in the right field. That doesn't mean you can't learn stuff. Yes, I've got all this marketing background. How can I transfer that into a job that's more supporting, that's more service oriented? I mean, I think about my own career. I was working at Wendy's. Okay, it's a hamburger chain. I was learning different marketing. I eventually ended up in new product marketing. And so can I transfer those skills to some other kind of work? Or can I say, you know what? These are not skills that I really am passionate about. So I'm going to go ahead and find another entirely opposite career. Again, when you're young, and 24 is incredibly young, go ahead and do something else if you don't feel it's your passion. Or take the skills you learned in whatever job you have now and go to another job. I went to healthcare. I took my marketing background in a fast food industry and I applied it to the healthcare industry. So can you be creative on finding things that you're interested in? And it really comes down to, and I think this is, if your audience remembers nothing else, remember this. It's what value you bring to the table. What are you bringing to the table? And just because you went to school, yeah, nobody cares. Everybody went to school. What value?
Right.
It's the truth. I went to Harvard.
Yeah,
Great, you went to Harvard. So did a bunch of other people. What value are you bringing to the table? And know what that value is. Because if you know what that value is, then you know what your worth is in terms of getting paid and compensated for that. And pay is not always the most important thing. It may be the benefits you got. It may be the career path. It may be the people you work with. All those things need to factor in to whether or not you're going to take a particular job. Don't take a job ever just because you're making a lot of money.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, money is, you need money to live, but it won't keep you alive spiritually, I would say. It will never fulfill you, right?
No, it won't. And every survey I've ever seen, money, compensation, financial compensation ranks somewhere 5, 6, 7, 8, on the importance of things that you want. I mean, people want to feel valued. I mean, you want to be valuable to your company and you want your company to feel that you have value. And that's usually number one. Am I valued? Do my opinions matter? Do I have a seat at the table to help make decisions and move projects along? I think one of the worst things bosses can do, and I've been in so many meetings where this has been the case, and you probably have as well, where you sit down with the boss, you're all sitting around a conference table, boss walks in, says, okay, here's the problem. And then the boss says, here's how I think we should solve the problem. A, B, C, and D. And then they're like, okay, I want to hear your opinions. What idiot is going to say something different or contrary to the boss?
Yes, boss.
A better way to do that would be for the boss to come in, sit down, state the problem, and then say, how do you think we should solve it? That's open communication. That's a leader. It's not like I've already figured it out. Well, what do we have in this meeting for? You're wasting our time. We'll just go implement what you want us to do. No, ask the people in the trenches. Ask the people that do this every day. Ask the people that know what the customers want, how we should solve this problem. You'll probably get better suggestions and also suggestions that will actually solve the problem.
Yeah, you can actually learn so much from other people, even those you think have less experience than you, right? If you really listen to them. Yeah. So how long did it actually take you from, so you were a marketing specialist at Wendy's, and then after that you worked at the hospital as administrator, right? And then you became a police officer. So how long did that transition take you? I'm curious to know. From police officer to Yeah. No, sorry, from hospital administrator to police officer. Yeah. Sounded like a challenging time if I read your book
I'm
because
going
you
to say
made that.
16 years.
Sorry? Six, 6 to 8
16
years.
years. Yeah,
16,
I mean,
16.
figure I graduated from college when I was 21, and I started as a police officer when I was 37. So, I was never good at math. That's why I became a cop. Yeah, I mean,
What age were you when you were a hospital administrator?
so I worked at Wendy's for almost 4 years, so probably 25, 26, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Okay.
And then I
Yeah.
did 10 years as a hospital administrator.
10 years, yeah. And during those 10 years as a hospital administrator, at what point did that dream reappear that, okay, now I want to take it seriously. I want to make that move actually?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of things going on there. My father died. My mother, was in the house by herself. I was kind of figuring that out, taking care of her, trying to have relationships, date, that kind of stuff. So there were a lot of moving parts in my
Yeah,
life.
but that is
Point in time.
the reality, right? I think people are I don't want to say delusional, but people think that, okay, if I want to change careers, maybe it will take like a few years. Um, I mean, in reality, it takes time, right? Like I changed my career from banking and now I'm a content creator. From the outside, people think that maybe it happened overnight, over a year. But like you said, it was very messy. It wasn't like A to B in 1 year. This happened, and then I tried this, and then this failed, and then I paused it, and I tried it again. And that's the reality. And I think that's the interesting part. Like, how, despite all those challenges and setbacks, do you still push through and go after your dream?
Well, I think like in anything in life, if you have a relationship, I mean, this is the person I'm going to marry. It's not so much finding the right person as it is
Yeah.
finding the right person at the right time. Timing in life is so important. And the same thing with the job. It's not finding the right job, it's finding the right job that's available to you at the right time. And so understand it's not just, I want a job. No, where are you in your life? I mean, where are you with your family? Where are you with your friends? Where are you, can I afford to move? I mean, understand that, like you say, and there's so many moving parts, and it's all about timing. But put yourself in a position, I would say, so that when that hits, when that timing is good or perfect, that you're able to take advantage of that and not be like, oh, I want to do this, but it just slipped past me like, kind of wind in the night. It's gone, and now I can't do it anymore. Put yourself in a position so that when the timing is right, you're available to take advantage of it.
Right. How did you keep that dream in front of your eyes at all time? Did you ever have like a vision board? Sometimes people make something like that, or did you write it down in a journal? How did you remind yourself of that dream?
I was always interested in those things. So, the movies that I watched, the television shows that I watched, the books that I read were all about law enforcement, were about things, and those things interested me. So I just sort of, I learned. Television's great. One of my old partners became a criminalist, and so would process homicide scenes and things like that. And it was the same time when CSI was a very popular television show. And she said, when I would get on the stand for a murder trial, she said, literally, the first 45 minutes of my testimony was debunking all the things that the jury had seen on CSI to say, well, yeah, we have that, but it's not like that. And sort of bringing them into reality. And, there is a thing called AFIS, Automatic Fingerprint Identification System, but it's not like you put a fingerprint in and it says, Terry Tucker's the killer. No.
Okay, not that easy.
It'll spit out 40 or 50 people who might be the person who did it. And you've got to go pull those fingerprint cards and look at every single one of them. So it's a 60-minute show. You got to make it happen in 60 minutes.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a challenge that nowadays many, especially younger people, millennials, Gen Z, have, telling the difference, or really realizing there's a difference between what's shown on screen that is like super like fastly edited and hyper quick, versus the reality where everything really takes time and you got to have the patience, right? Like you did.
You have to have the patience. And like I said, put yourself in a position so when the timing is right, you're able to take advantage of that thing that you know you're supposed to do in your life.
Right, right. That's a very good point. Yeah, I wanted to talk about a very, very important topic, something that many people go through, but maybe very few actually acknowledge to other people, which is being at a place in your life where you feel like you're at rock bottom. You feel that you're in a very bad place, whatever the reason may be. It could be family, it could be health, it could be work, but you just feel you're at the bottom of your life and you really can't get out of that. Do you have an experience like that in your life? And it might be related, I'm not sure if it's related to your health journey or other things. Could you share that with us and also tell us how you got out of that?
Yes. I'll tell you how to get out of it first, and then I'll share the
Okay.
story with you.
Yeah, that's important.
I'll do it a little backwards.
Yeah.
How do you deal with things? How do you get better? How do you improve? How do you put yourself, like we're talking about, in that position where you're able to take advantage of those things when they present themselves? And it's really simple, but our brains are hardwired to avoid pain and discomfort and to seek pleasure. So to the brain, the status quo, the way things are right now, it's comfortable and familiar, and it should be left alone. Even if that status quo is you're at rock bottom. This is terrible. I'm not living, a purposeful life. I'm living in squalor. I'm poor. I have no opportunities. Okay, that's fine. But we know what those constants are, so just leave it alone. I would say do things that you don't want to do. And I try to do this every day of my life. Do something that makes you uncomfortable, that scares you, that is potentially embarrassing for you. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit, and they hit all of us, we lose somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you'll be so much more resilient to handle those things when they present themselves. So do things. It's like, okay, you know what? I'm laying on the couch. I really should go to the gym today. I don't want to go to the gym. Go to the gym. When you get up in the morning, I don't want to make my bed. Make your bed. I'll grab a donut on the way to work. No, grab a good meal that you know is going to fuel your body do the things you don't want to do. Everybody does the easy stuff. Everybody does the easy stuff. If it was easy, everybody would do it. The hard is what makes it good. So just do those things every day that you don't want to do. I know it sounds real simple, and it really is simple, but your brains are hardwired to say, I don't want to do hard things.
Yeah.
The only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve, the only way you're going to get better, the only way you're going to get out of rock bottom is if you do things that you don't want to do and do things that make you uncomfortable. So yes, have I ever been in those situations? Absolutely. When I was diagnosed with cancer back in 2012, I was basically told that I'd be dead in 2 years. So I took a death sentence and said, can I turn it in to a life sentence? And one of the things that I did, they didn't have any therapies for me. So my doctor put me on a drug called interferon. And I took a weekly injection of this drug. And the side effects of the interferon were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for 5 years. So imagine having the flu. And I'm not talking about, oh, I ache, I don't feel good. I'm talking about diarrhea, throwing up, chills, shakes, muscle aches, everything for 3 days every week. And that wasn't a cure. That was, as my doctor said, we're trying to kick the can down the road. So if you would have asked me at that point in time, what were my goals? Honestly, my answer would have been, I'm just trying to live to tomorrow. That was really where I was at. I just need to survive until tomorrow. And then when tomorrow comes, I'll figure out a way to live to the next day. I had no goals. If you would have said, what are your monthly goals or your annual goals or your 10-year goals? I didn't have any goals. I just wanted to survive. And I really felt I was there were sort of two camps. There was I'm living, and then there was the camp of I'm not dying. And I was in that second camp. I wasn't living. I wasn't producing anything. I was a burden, a huge burden to my family, but I was in that not dying camp. I just wasn't dying. and I prayed, literally prayed to die. I was like, look, God, this is not living. Please take me out of this. I never contemplated suicide. I don't want your audience to think that. I don't ever think that's an option. But I did feel like I wasn't contributing, and I was in sort of that not dying state. And that was literally for me, I was at rock bottom. It was just, I'm just trying to survive day to day.
Yeah, so I can't really start imagining how hard that must have been. And I'm so glad that you're here today and you're able to speak with me because you went through all these challenges. There's so many people who experience much less worse than that, but have a hard time getting out. So I think what you said was really perfect. Just got to take it one step at a time, right? When you're in such a difficult position.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing that I remember from your book I wanted to address is about victim mentality. And it's also a bit connected to being at rock bottom, I think, in a way, right? I think that nowadays this is a big problem among maybe not just younger people, also middle-aged people, right? Having this victim mentality where you tend to blame other people for your situation. And because of that, you use it as an excuse not to do anything about your life to improve it. So how do you change someone's mind to get out of that victim mentality? Because, if someone has that mentality, it's very, very difficult to convince them. I know people like them, and it's very difficult to get them out. Like, what would you say about that?
It is. And I guess when you understand that nobody's coming to your aid, nobody's going to bail you out, this is all on you. And I've seen so many people in my life that start down the road toward a goal, whatever that goal is, to get an education, to start a business, to marry somebody that they're really interested in. And something gets in their way. They butt up against an impediment. Something stops them from doing it. And they can't get over it, around it, or through it. And so they quit. But we just don't quit. Now we've got to blame somebody. We've got to blame our parents or our boss or our station in life. So many people never take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. I want my life to be shaped by the decisions that I made, not by the ones that I didn't make or that somebody made for me. And it was funny, when I got cancer, so many people said to me, oh, you got cancer, that's terrible. Who do you blame? I'm like, what do you mean, who do I blame? Well, you must blame somebody because you got cancer. I said, no, I don't blame anybody. I've had all 88 genes that doctors either know of or suspect cause every form of cancer that we know of. And I have no mutations in any of my genes, which begs the question, why did I get this incredibly rare form of cancer? Nobody can answer that question. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. But it was funny, when people found out I have a faith life, they were like, well, you got cancer. You must blame God. And I used to joke with them. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, hey, Mary Tucker, cancer today. I don't believe that at all. But I do believe God has given me the strength to go back and to really keep moving forward when you're in those really low places. And I'll never forget, back in 2020, I had my leg amputated because of the cancer, and I found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm still being treated for. And I remember my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and be like, huh, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces and on the outside of my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? And I'll never forget this to the day I die. My oncologist sort of put his head down. He shook his head no. And then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me, when I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying. Spend more time worrying about the living. If you spend time worrying about the living, death will not be as scary for you. And I'll end this with this amazing American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago, and it goes like this. When you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. How did that whole experience change your perspective about life and maybe also about time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I spent so much of my life being active. I was an athlete up through college. I was a police officer that was active. And I think when you get to a point where something like cancer prevents you from doing what you're good at, you figure out what's important and you do that. And like I said before, doing and having things will not make you happy, will not make you fulfilled. You're young enough. I don't know if you remember a man by the name of Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. He had a television show when
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Rogers'
Mr.
Neighborhood.
Yeah.
So Mr. Rogers, very, very influential, especially among young people, in helping them to find their voice, find their identity, find what was important in their life. When Mr. Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. If you spend your life in service of other people, if you spend your life adding value to other people's life, I can promise you at the end of your life will have purpose, your life will have meaning, and you will leave a lasting legacy. People always ask me, how do you want to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered. I'm not going to be remembered. I mean, we're here for such a short period of time. People aren't going to remember you. But what I do want, why I'm here, is to connect with people. If you connect with people now, that's the legacy that you will leave. Am I adding value to your life by the connection that we have? And if the answer to that is yes, I don't think it gets any better than that.
Wow. I think that's very perfectly said. So it maybe connects to how you find your purpose, right? Asking yourself the question, how can I add value to you? How can I be of service? And not thinking about yourself all the time, but thinking about how can you do something for others. That's where you find your purpose.
It
Yeah.
is, and we can do that. You can do that in the corporate world. If that's what you want to do. If you want to be in banking, if you want to be in finance, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to be in medicine, law, whatever you want to do. If you want to dig ditches, that's fine too. Whatever you do, try to be the best at it. Be the best garbage man you can be if you want to be the best janitor you can be if you end up being a janitor. Be the best CEO of a company you can be if that's what you end up doing. Whatever you end up doing, give it your all, give it your best, and I promise you'll be a whole lot happier.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, I think this is a perfect place to end this podcast. But before, I want to do a lightning round with you in which I ask you 8 questions. Yeah, I'll ask you 8 questions that you can answer in 2 to 3 sentences. Yeah, so let's start. What would you say to someone in their 20s to 30s who thinks they're lagging behind everyone else in their career and life?
That life is not to be examined by other people. You're on your own journey. Focus on your journey. Be happy for what other people have and what other people do, but don't be jealous because they have something you don't. That's not their life. Live your life. I guess that was more than 2 or 3 sentences. Sorry.
That's fine. Yeah, that's perfect. What advice would you give to someone who's at rock bottom? We had that already, but maybe like the shorter version.
I guess I would say that rock bottom is a great place to start to build a quality life off of. You can't get any lower. So understand that you're as low as you can be. The only way you can go is up. So figure out what up looks like for you and do that.
Yeah, that's so true. What would you say to someone who's considering to change careers but is really afraid?
Do it. Just like I said before, do it. If it scares you, do it. Because the things you're going to regret in your life are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be the things you didn't do. So don't be one of those people like, I wish I would have done this, that, or the whatever. Do it now. Be scared. It's okay to be scared. We're all scared.
Yeah, I agree. You just got to go ahead and do it. Don't think too much. What do you wish you knew when you were in your 20s and 30s?
I wish I was braver. I wish, I wish I was braver. I wish I would have followed my dreams, followed my passion more readily. I got there. It wasn't a straight line. And so much of life there isn't a straight line. It's kind of all over the place. But Just
Right.
be brave. Know that you're supposed to do something in life, figure out what that is, and do it.
Okay. What is the best way to overcome self-doubt you have?
Act, get up, move, do something. I mean, literally, so much of your problems can be solved by getting up and just physically moving your body. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go for a run, you go for a walk, whatever, just physically moving your body. It's amazing how much energy you get, and that physical energy transfers over into your mental energy and your mental outlook.
So true. Which book do you think, or books do you think everyone should read?
Outside of mind, sorry.
Yeah, of course. Sustainable Excellence, everyone, read it.
I'll show it to you. I love this book. I've read it several times. It's called Legacy, by James Kerr. It's about this author who embedded with the New Zealand national rugby team, who by most accounts are the most successful sports franchise in any sport in any country, and just how they operate. They look for people who have character. They look for people who are humble. It's just a different, I mean, when their matches are over, the captains, the leaders of the team stay behind and clean up the locker room. So the locker room is better looking, is better presentable than when they found it, when they came in the first place. So it's just a whole different outlook on how you can be excellent in your life.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, I'll check it out. What is your favorite quote about success?
The best quote I've ever heard about success is from a basketball coach here in the United States that coached at UCLA, the University of California at Los Angeles, when I was growing up. And at the time, he was the most successful college basketball coach in terms of wins. But listen to his definition of success. His definition is this: success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing that you did the best to become the best that you're capable of becoming. Again, the most successful, the winningest coach in basketball, but that definition says nothing about winning. So understand, did you do everything you could to be your best? And if the answer to that is yes, then you're successful.
Yeah, that's a beautiful quote. Yeah, thank you. And the last question, very important. What brings you the biggest happiness in life?
What I call my 3 F's: faith, family, and friends. Like I said, very strong faith in God. My family is my sanctuary. They are my rock. I love them. I would not be here without them. And then my friends, the people that I know, if I had to go to war, those people would be with me. And, somebody asked me once, if you had to give somebody advice on choosing a mate, somebody they would marry, what would it be? And I said, here's 2 things. Number 1, are your metrics better? Because you're with this person, are you smarter? Are you learning more? Are you financially better off? Do you have a better friend group? And number 2, would you go to war with them? Would they be with you at the worst, at the darkest, at the lowest points in your life? And if the answer to those questions are yes, then think about marrying that person.
That makes a lot of sense. Awesome. Yeah. So before we end this podcast, where can people find you on social media?
So I have a blog, website called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. You can leave me a message there. My social media links are there. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Yeah, great. I will put all your links down in the descriptions below so everyone can check them out. Also, the link to your book, Sustainable Excellence. Terry Tucker, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. It's really an honor, and I'm sure this will be a great inspiration to everyone watching it. Thank you so much.
Well, to you, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you today.
Same here. Okay, bye. Take care.
Bye.